Hi everyone, my name is Alistair Wheat and I'm here with my colleague Jack to talk to you about the latest influencer marketing stories from the last month. And I'm going to start off by actually giving the baton over to Jack because he's got some really interesting story to tell you, a really interesting story to tell you about what Twitter's been up to.
Yes, on the very big question of how do we fix our particularly acrimonious discourse. One answer, so far as Twitter is concerned, is to maybe try and kind of use a little bit of behavioral psychology and kind of nudge people into doing the reading. A little bit of good old-fashioned shame. They're introducing a new feature that is going to prompt people if they're about to retweet something that Twitter can tell they haven't clicked on. So I think this kind of makes sense. I guess what's interesting about it ultimately is, well, I think there's kind of two things really. It's, from a marketing perspective, it's a feature that decreases engagement, which is kind of, it feels counterintuitive. Obviously, social networks want you to spend as much time as possible. I think the second thing it kind of reveals is Twitter's continuing positioning actually in the last 6 months has kind of been just make Facebook look bad by comparison. Because I think, earlier on in a certain term of office, maybe they were taking a lot of heat for kind of some of their more famous users. And they've, I think, fairly successfully in terms of the sorts of stories I'm seeing. I could be wrong about this, but I'm seeing less about, their role in kind of undermining elections or whatever it is. And I'm seeing rather more about a certain Mr. Zuckerberg's company. So it's working in that sense. I guess, as I kind of remind you all in the newsletter, really, that the main thing to remember is, the engagements that we get are, they're only as good as the action that they ultimately inspire. So it's just another reminder to kind of make sure that there's a good reason to click on your thing. Hopefully you don't want, Twitter mopping up after you and forcing people to click on your stuff. Think really carefully about why people are going to share it. Alistair, you have got an update on the big question of influencer lists.
Yes, but just before I go into that, I remember several times when some stories have trended and it's been the usual kind of Twitter mob reacting with outrage about a certain story, and then the publishers come along and said, well, actually hardly anyone's clicked on that story, so all these people moaning about it, we can see that the number of retweets are far higher than the actual click-throughs. So it'd be interesting to see whether publishers still see that sort of data when one of their stories gets jumped upon by the kind of the Twitter anger brigade. But yeah, do also have a story about us as Analytica and how we are also changing how we do things. So we have been busy producing a new feature about people who are influential in the IIoT space, so the industrial Internet of Things. Bit of tongue twister there. And this is different in how we've done them in the past. We've done 162 lists over the last 8 years across a whole variety of topics. So everything from climate change to esports to finance to AR and a whole range of other sort of themes. And we produce them as top 100 lists or top 200 lists, etc. And we rank people 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. So that has been great. A lot of people have responded to those really well, and they keep asking us when the next ones are coming out. But this time we're doing it a bit differently because we're not putting it out as a ranking as such. We are putting it out simply as a list of people that we recommend you follow if you are interested in that topic. So if you're interested in IIoT, then have a look at the article that we've published and the people that we feature in it. So we are specifically also trying to break out this list of who to follow based upon different roles. So we're looking specifically at people who are analysts in the space, people who are journalists, and also then academics and researchers. And we're also trying to then subdivide it into some of the key IIoT sectors, so energy, smart cities, cybersecurity, and transport and logistics, as well as then looking at some of the brands, people who are speakers and professional influencers. So a different way that we are doing this sort of research and reporting. We hope you find it useful. Do please let us know whether you like the change in the format. One of the reasons we're switching the format is just to get away with the debate of people going, oh, why am I number 3? I'm more important than the person at number 2. So hopefully we're moving a little bit away from that. And if we have just missed you out on the list, sorry about that. But we want to make this a bigger list. But if you want to look at more than just the top top 100s, then check out our site as well. We've got loads of other resources also on there, and we'll be doing more of these in the coming months as well, looking at a variety of other fields, which I've got lots of discussion online, and we'll be analysing who the best people are to follow. So that was a little bit of news from us. Back to you, Jack.
Yeah, no, an exciting change, and one I think hopefully sort of provides even more value from those lists, and we hopefully start recognizing people not just for kind of how big they are, but also what the nature of their contribution is to each topical community. So my second story is around, actually it's a kind of a piece of research that I think was done by maybe Takumi on they were kind of looking at where people are getting their news. And something they found is that around 1 in 4 consumers is getting news from, news and opinion from influencers ahead of journalists. I mean, possibly this is the sort of press release that gets shared knowing that you get a sort of initial eye roll reaction of like, oh God, the kids these days just listening to the influencers about news, and this is why the country's going to hell in a handbasket and that kind of thing. I think really what it reflects is a kind of probably an increasing blurring of the line between influencer and journalist. And that's, I don't mean that in the sense of journalists kind of forgoing journalistic ethics, but often I think a lot of the most interesting and informative journalists are the people who have kind of built a presence on social and are using that to do research, to share the results of their investigations. Someone I shouted out, I'm going to shout out in the newsletter, is Sophia Smith-Gaylor, who's the religion correspondent at the BBC, makes really good Instagram content that is, very detailed reporting, and it doesn't in any way take away from her ability to kind of report effectively and truthfully that she's on social media. So, I think really the lesson is it reinforces what probably a lot of us in the sort of brand marketing world have known for a while, is that sometimes the individual can be a better vessel for the message and is able to sort of communicate it in a more direct, maybe a little bit more of a human way. And while there's a time and a place for the sort of official brand communications and the official news, it isn't at all surprising to me that some people do like to kind of get news and opinion from a person, and that people are using trusted intermediaries is no shock to me at all. So finally, Alistair, you have a request relating to our survey.
Yes, and as Jack was just talking about a survey done by one of our peers, and we'll often talk about surveys done in this space, regardless of who's done the research, as long as it's credible and interesting. But we also do our own surveys, and we also want to do our own research into the influencers and the brands that we're working with. And so this survey we're doing now is focusing on B2B influencers and industry practitioners. So we are very much focused on, as Jack was just saying, topical communities, so groups of influencers and professionals, academics, a whole range of people talking together online. And we want to ask some of those people who are the leading voices in those spaces about how they feel about working with brands, what their experience has been working with brands. Now, some of these influencers are quote unquote professional influencers. Their business is very much being available to partner with brands to create content. Whereas some of these other influencers probably actually hate the word influencer, would never call themselves an influencer. But they are people who are experts in their field and they're talking online, and they clearly have influence, and we can see that they have influence because of the analysis that we're doing. So we're surveying both people who would call themselves influencers and those who wouldn't, but are influential, to find out about how brands are engaging with them. Are brands reaching out to them? If they are, what sort of collaborations are they doing, whether it's creating content or sharing stuff online or acting as a consultant. So we've got loads of great responses. We'll be publishing the results in October. If you're listening to this or reading this article and you haven't seen the survey, just reply to the newsletter or tweet at us online at Analytica, or you can tweet at me directly at alwheat, and we'd be happy to send you the link to get your input into that as well. So we're asking about also just what are the sorts of topics that you're focused in, what are the sort of things that if you were to do stuff with brands you'd like to do. So there's hopefully a really good set of questions that you'll find interesting to answer. So that's it from me. Back to you, Jack.
Yes, there you go. That's the secret to how we at Analytica have become so wise, is we ask people in the industry questions. It's as simple as that. But yeah, a really good study. I know the last one of these we did has produced really interesting results and good insights for the industry. So look out for my bonus story in the newsletter. You can see a woman scoop up a handful of bees without any beekeeping equipment on, which may either delight, horrify you, or possibly both, which was how I felt about it. But otherwise, we will see you next month, and thanks very much for watching.
Thanks, everyone. Stay safe.